So that just stopped in mid-stream at chapter 105, and I just thought I have to finish at least that chapter before I can chill for the evening. Bliss After Life. This is a story about a reincarnation, and Bliss passed away when she was 95. This is a little while ago. We are now well into the story, and this involves her family and so on. We are now at chapter 105, which describes David, who has found this house he wants to buy, and the lady who owns the house is called Hilary, and she was very happy that they found their way to her. And she was going to buy the flat she had found. She would have her independence there, but there was assistance in case she needed it. She could even have a cooked lunch every day. There was a central lounge and dining room, but she also had a kitchen and everything she needed in the flat. One spare room for visitors, and she was looking forward, wandering up the high street. She was telling him all about it whilst they were walking around the garden, which had an even more of a surprise for him around the back of it. A summer house. All doors were open to let the sun in, and a shed. He had gone to the estate agent the following Monday, and everything had worked out so smoothly. He would be in the cottage before March was over, and he couldn't wait to tell Susan. Chapter 106. Susan. Susan found herself staring into the garden. She had just finished talking to Ben, who had been out for a walk with Faye, who again had problems sleeping and had felt very restless. He sounded a little worried. Faye had been complaining about pains, and they had sat themselves on a bench in the park during the walk they were having. He was waiting for her to feel better. Susan thought she would ring Evelyn, because something told her the baby was on its way. Faye had asked Ben to ring her, and for Susan that had meant something was up. As they had all agreed, they had lunch together later, and why ring unless Faye felt something was up? Evelyn, it's me, Sue. Faye and Ben are sitting on a bench in Wimbledon Park. They had gone out for a walk, as Faye felt so restless. She seems to be in pain, and I'm so glad you're at home. Are you busy? No, thankfully. I just got back from shopping, and I'm free. Shall I drive up there? No, I don't think that's necessary, but I shall ring Ben and just tell him you are coming here. Okay? Yes, okay, I set off. Ring me when you want me to go. If you want me to go after all. I just put my stuff away and come. Susan saw a missed call from David. She had no space to think about him now, although she smiled to herself and couldn't help thinking that the house in the New Forest must have worked out. Chapter 107. Oh, Susan, that was 106. Chapter 107. Lydia makes her entrance. Faye had felt increasingly wobbly during the walk. A dull pain had crept from her pelvis, and she was wondering if that little wet patch on the bed this morning was a telltale. She couldn't remember why she had not mentioned it to Ben, but after a cup of tea this morning she just wanted to go for a walk in a park, and Ben had taken her to Wimbledon Common. She had had vivid dreams and had been trying to explain them to Ben, but even to her own ears they sounded weird. She had been talking to her daughter, but it was not her daughter, but a man. She had seen Bliss, or at least Bliss as she looked in the photos she had seen of her. She had found it hard to piece them all together, these fragments, and then a sudden sharp pain made her gasp, and they sat down on a bench. She had wanted to be back home with Susan, and asked Ben to ring his mum. Suddenly, all she wanted was to lie down. She waited until the pain subsided, and they walked back to the car as fast as she could. She had to stop once as the pain made her double over, and suddenly she could feel her legs getting wet. Ben, I think my waters just broke. He could see her dress was a little wet, and he felt a surge of panic. What if she had our baby right here on the path? But she straightened up and walked ahead quite fast, and he just followed her. Once on a level, he put his arm around her. It's really starting then, is it? I think so. Funny, I thought I knew how it would feel, but I don't. Let's just get home to your mum as quickly as we can. Evelyn is making her way to Mum. Ben was glad. He felt out of his depth. They were quick getting into the car and arrived 10 minutes later at Susan's, who opened the door before they had got out of the car. Evelyn is already here. Is the kettle boiling and getting towels ready? Ben had spoken his thoughts out loud before he could stop himself. He was glad to hear Faye laugh out loud, and she was relieved to see Evelyn waiting for her. She suddenly felt okay and the pain had gone. I feel fine now, and I think it has started. Evelyn, my waters broke before we got to the car, and I had this really sharp pain. I can feel she wants to be born, and I'm glad you are here. And you. She took Susan's hand, and Evelyn took her other one. It's going to be fine. She had to stop talking as another pain was searing up her back. Evelyn looked at Susan, and they took Faye up the stairs to their bedroom. Ben right behind them, but very glad that he had two grown-up women looking after Faye. He suddenly felt incredibly out of his depth. He wondered if their second child would have a more competent father. How could he even think of a second child? He felt his heart beating up to his throat. His first one was only just about to be born. Susan helped Faye into the bed, put the piling cushions around her. You might want to walk around, stand up or squat. See how you feel and follow what feels best. I don't think we have time to wait for a midwife to come. I will ring the hospital now anyway, and we see. How are you feeling now? I'm glad to be here. I know she is ready to be born. I did not know how much it would hurt. She stopped, and Evelyn held her hand, which was grasped very firmly. Ben took the other hand and almost winced because her grip was like iron. He remembered this from a television program and tried to keep calm when she released the grip and fell back with a sigh. Faye had taken all her clothes off, and Evelyn inspected her. She could clearly see the head, an opening the size of a 50-pence piece. There was going to be more work to be done before the whole head was going to appear. She got her phone and handed it to Susan to ring the hospital with the details. She felt it was all going to be okay, but she wanted to be on the safe side and gestured to Susan to ask them to send an ambulance, just in case. Susan spoke to a competent nurse and came back into the room to see Faye again in a contraction. Ben tried to smile, and she was glad Evelyn looked so calm and competent. It seemed no time at all that the ambulance arrived. They checked on Faye, but she had not dilated any more since Evelyn had last checked, and they decided to take her to hospital. Faye had quite liked the idea of a home birth, but she suddenly felt overwhelmed, and Evelyn said she would come. So would Susan and Ben, and she let herself be taken care of. It seemed nothing very unusual was going on, and she felt fine being driven with blue lights, interrupted by periods of pain, which seemed to subside, come and go like waves. In the hospital, she could see the lights above her. She felt all was going to be okay, although every contraction had her gasping. Once in the room, she was offered gas and air and was grateful to accept it. This made everything feel surreal. She laughed about Ben, who pretended to want some of the laughing gas himself. She was not dilating. The nurses seemed to crowd around her, and the pain became stronger. You are definitely in labor. Your waters have broken, but you're not dilating very much, and I would like to speed things up. The nurse seemed to know what she was doing. Maybe you should have something stronger for the increased contractions. Is the pain going to get worse when I dilate faster? Well, yes, very likely. Would you like an epidural? One of the nurses smiled at her. Faye was afraid of more pain. She had heard some stories of epidurals, and she was not sure being numb to it all would be a good thing. She felt she was meant to experience the birth. I called a doctor who specializes in this. Have a chat with him. She put the medication to speed everything up into the already prepared vein, and within a few minutes a doctor appeared. So you would like an epidural? He looked calm and relaxed. I don't really know. I'm in quite some pain, but I'm worried about having everything go numb, and maybe I lose the use of my legs permanently. Faye, may I call you that? I do not think you are helping your baby by being in stress and pain. It will be a little while yet until she appears. No need to suffer, and I can assure you I do several of these every day. No one has ever yet had problems walking once they leave here. Really, this is what she wanted to hear. She looked at Ben, who smiled, and she nodded. He turned her on her side, and the nurse held her hand. All I ask of you is that you stay very still whilst I administer the epidural. She had a strange sensation and tried to think of other things. She was glad she could not see what was going on. The pain subsided and she started to relax. Thank you. That was well done. Now relax and let the nurses do their job. Your husband is here for you, right, aren't you? Ben felt his shoulders straighten. He took Faye's hand. Yes, I am right here and I shall stay. I'm so glad you are here, my darling Ben. Faye felt all happy and calm, no pain, and she hoped Lydia was going to manage. She suddenly wondered if this epidural would affect her. Had she made it more difficult for her daughter to be active by accepting this medication? She felt a surge of worry. What if Lydia was incapacitated and could not make her way out of the birth canal? Doctor, I'm making it more difficult for my baby, am I? To come out? I suddenly felt no pain and I'm relieved, but what about my baby? Will she find it harder? I did not give you a very high dosage, Faye. I know there is a possibility that your baby will get a little lethargic, but this epidural will wear off. Work with it. Enjoy the rest, but I feel it best you gather your strength. That these contractions will increase as we are now speeding up your labor. We are watching your baby and your heartbeat and pulse all the time. Stay calm and look forward to your baby. She felt Ben's hand and looked at Evelyn, who was standing at the end of the bed with Susan. She wished her mum was here. All knowledge of acupuncture during birth had gone out of her head. As if reading her mind, Evelyn began to massage her feet, and Susan took one leg and one foot, and she took the other. This felt good. No pain, and Ben got up to put some music on. They had brought their iPad, and she was glad he had remembered. A calmness took over her, and she relaxed into the feeling of numbness. She could still strangely feel the massage on her feet, and Ben had taken her hand again, but she felt no contractions at this moment and decided to lie back and enjoy the respite. Chapter 108, Lydia. An overwhelming sense of urgency. Lydia felt her whole body needing space and light. She felt it was time to be born. Her body had been in the right position for a while, and Lydia was all attention as her urge to move forward had been increasing whilst her mum had been asleep. She wanted to move, to feel, to breathe, and she had started her birth. She felt quite calm. There seemed a natural process to it all. She could feel her mother walking and talking, and suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of movement. She was being pushed, and she felt she was contributing to the process. Suddenly everything felt tight and small, and she moved with a movement downwards, a sensation so powerful that she could feel her head moving forward and downward, like a wave. Complete concentration and a sensation of movement like she had not felt before. She felt the urge for space, which seemed to result in a force pushing her downwards, slowly, powerfully. She felt her mother's fear and pain, felt pain herself in the tightness which seemed to get ever smaller, suddenly a calmness of surrounding. Her mother's heartbeat slowing. She relaxed, felt like floating, as she was when she was tiny. Another wave, and Lydia could feel the movement downwards was still happening. She felt herself surging forward, and slowly she felt a movement downwards, ever tighter, slowly further downwards. All was happening by itself. Lydia felt herself in the birth canal. Slowly but surely the movements were forwards, downwards, waves of movement. I can feel pain, I can feel the contractions. The epidural had definitely worn off. The last 5 hours seemed to have passed without anyone noticing the time. The nurse confirmed she was almost fully dilated and her contractions were fast and regular. Ben had a feeling of excitement like he had never felt before. He had gone to stand by the nurse. He wanted to see and let Faye know what was happening. He could clearly see ahead now. He felt suddenly woozy, but caught himself. I can see the head, Faye. I can. It's coming, really. I can see it. Be strong. Time to push. The nurse held Faye's hand, and Evelyn calmly started to breathe with Faye. He could see the hands when gripped by Faye as hard as she could manage, and he could see the baby's head quickly getting larger. He moved out of the way to let the doctor do his job, but was not going to miss the final movement of Lydia's birth. Faye was pushing hard, breathing and talking Chinese under her breath. She gave out the loudest roar he had ever heard from her, and with amazement he saw his daughter flopping out into the waiting hands of the doctor, who expertly cleaned her breathing passages. A loud scream from Lydia. He swiftly put a towel around her, a hustle and bustle before he put her on her mother's chest. Ben suddenly felt like a huge weight had been lifted. He felt pride and love and joy. It's quite moving. Tears streaming down his cheek. And when Faye looked at him, he decided it was the very best moment of his life. He could see the umbilical cord pulsing, and when the doctor asked him if he wanted to cut it, he waited, and then he did. She was her own life now, a perfect little girl. They rubbed her and put her straight on Faye's breast. She latched on like a little bird, immediately sucking, and her mum, sweaty and tired, had the most overwhelming feeling of love and gratitude on her face. He leaned down to kiss Faye and Lydia, who had her tiny eyes firmly closed and her little hands in a fist. He felt amazing. He looked at his mum and Evelyn. Both had their handkerchiefs out. Everyone hugged. Lydia, welcome to our world. She opened her eyes. They were dark pools of light. Looking at her mum, she gave a sigh and settled back to sleep. The nurse stepped forward, smiling. She congratulated Faye and gently took the baby to be weighed. She is 6 pounds exactly, and she took her first breath at 22 minutes past 10 p.m. tonight. A healthy little girl. You said Lydia? What a lovely name. After a quick wipe, she handed the little bundle to Ben, who never lost the smile on his face. She was so tiny, delicate, and perfect. And I stop here, because this is going to be the last chapter of Book 1, and I just want to make sure that I do it right. Good evening.